what it is. It takes, yes, Mikel, we are online. Your session is here. Thank you very much for being part of it. And Mohammed, there was one question in the chat for you. I'll take that up with, someone was asking, Mikel, can I just take that question for
Okay.
Mohammed? Basically, someone was asking, are you connected with the associative network that works on mediation in Morocco? So is that a question? That's a question for you.
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So we'll tell that Atman is in Morocco.
And the one of the United Nations system in New York.
Okay, perfect.
And now with you.
So, Mikel, it's all about you, of course, telling us about yourself. And at the same time, let me just put up Mikel's, this is what we are doing. And of course, it's gone to 25 plus speakers, 25 plus countries. The new ones have that. So, Mikel, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go into, then you give me 30 seconds. Yes, Mikel, are you there? Mikel has disappeared. So what I'll do is, up till then, I'll put up something about, because he's been having a bit of a technical thing. Last time also when we met, he had some technical issues happening. So he'll come back. So basically up till then, mediatorvikram.com, some information, because Mohammed and Susanna, there's so many videos now. There are almost 500 videos now.
Wow.
So how are you going to find the information is the important thing. So please come here. But the World Mediation Circle, you people have to be involved in. There are lots of activities we have to do here. And some updates you get on the newsletter, on the LinkedIn newsletter. So you can click here and subscribe to that. And of course, I keep asking people to support. Nothing much happens on that, but I have to keep doing that because time is spent. I have to balance between how much time to spend. So last year's events are here. So you had this World Mediators Conference with 93 sessions, 80 panelists. So if you click here, you can have the speakers and the YouTube links and the YouTube playlist, so you can see that. So Mikel, are you back with us?
Yes, sorry.
Perfect. So it's all about you. Please tell us about yourself and then the topic, and let's go from there.
Okay. So maybe the first I start with, I saw a little Union Jack in my my presentation, but I'm clearly Spanish. I'm very Spanish, whatever that means. My work happens between Asia, specifically Chinese-speaking country, which is Taiwan, with quite some roots in the cultural roots, maybe in with Japanese, and which affects language a little bit in some of the day-to-day. Maybe I will mention a couple of examples later on. And the UK. So yes, it is true that is where my professional life has happened. And I would like to think that in the past I have mediated in problems that stem from linguistical problems between native Spanish speakers and English speakers. So thank you so much, Vikram, because this is a topic that is very close to my heart, and my the instances in which I've had to negotiate or mediate between parties, and I hope that we can have a nice discussion, and I hope to learn a lot from my session and from others.
But Mikel, which country should I add to your name? Should I put? What you can tell me? I liked adding countries. It's a nice thing for me to do.
Spain, yeah.
So very nice. I tell you what, Mikel, Susanna doesn't speak English. So you are going to stick around after your session and help her. Although I did tell her open Google Translate and just speak into that, but you can help her also. Yes, good. So I can add Spain to your thing. Okay, yeah, good.
Yes,
I like it. I like it. Countries, because this gives us a perspective from Spain. It's a nice thing. Of course, Taiwan, your experience there. It's a good thing to get that perspective. So that's why.
Yeah. Come from Spain, from a part of Spain in the north where we're used to conflict. So maybe that's because you asked me to talk a bit about myself. We were born surrounded by conflict, so it's something that we bring with ourselves wherever we go. And I guess it has. It's not just my opinion. I think I shared this with quite a few Spanish people involved in similar situations. That we have, maybe in a hard way, learned that we can't always try to go for a win-all situation, and that compromise it's very necessary. It's difficult in the commercial fields that we deal with, because always people want to get the absolute best position for themselves. But understanding that might not be possible and might be counterproductive, it's one very big step in our work. And I think big part of this comes from certainly for me, it does, from upbringing surrounded by quite a lot of conflict. Yeah. So I don't know what else should I? I've made a few pointers here, Vikram, but I don't know how these sessions go. You had planned it.
Totally the way you want to. This is now your half an hour. However you want to take it, I'm happy.
Okay.
You want to share a presentation, you want to do anything, that's yours. It's your half an hour. You get us in if you want us to come in. Otherwise, you please. So totally your session.
Okay. Then, well, I've put a few pointers here, just mostly sharing experiences and hopefully trying to, as I'm speaking about them, learning something from them. And please interrupt if you've got something that you think is similar, or I'm getting wrong, or I hope to learn from you. So the one I wanted to start with is something that in my well, I work in the offshore wind exclusively. Maybe that should be an introduction, and I help companies reach settlements often when things have gone a little bit heated and there is a conflict. But sometimes I help negotiate, so it's not necessarily mediation, but in those situations there's a lot of internal mediation and coaching of parties to make sure that when they say negotiate the best part for party A, what happens within all the party A1, A2, A3, so all the ones involved on that side. That's why I try to say I'm a dispute avoider, and I'm an intra-company mediator and cross-company mediator, cross-party mediator. I'm an engineer by training, and I work with a lot of engineers from very different countries and technical people. And one thing that I have learned very early on is that the value of speaking the same language in reaching the initial stages of empathy in mediation is incalculable. Someone told me go early on. I think I had a counterpart in Angola, and told me just go and speak Portuguese with them. I said, but I can't speak Portuguese. Just speak Spanish. They'll understand you. And many years later, someone else told me something similar. Oh, you speak the same language, go with them. And I thought, but I have no skills on this. I don't know what the topic is. I feel out of my depth. I'm going to make the company or your party look very bad. And I said, no, not. The value of speaking the same language is something you cannot put a tag to it. And it came from two very different persons to very different situations. And it is true, it did work. In the first instance, we ended up speaking Spanish because that Portuguese or that Angolan person spoke very good Spanish. But it's true that we created a human connection that led to a lot of empathy that then made negotiations a lot easier. And conversely, something that can happen, and it's to the detriment of well, suppose the English, as a case in point is for these sessions, is the lingua franca of the world. So and it's unfortunate that for English speakers who don't speak any other languages, when they try very hard and they're in situations of mediation, situations of settlement, situations when they have to reach for the other party, sometimes one thing that I've experienced is that might be trying very hard but come across as condescending. And this is a very tough. I've tried to explain to some colleagues and friends and clients how to deal with this, but it's very difficult because whether we like it or not, we're being taught manners and codes of politeness, and it's very difficult to abstract from them. So it could be something you will have heard many times when let's say monolingual person, often an English speaker, will go to a multilingual person and say, oh, you speak English much better than I speak, I don't know, Greek. And the Greek person actually gets quite offended because they think, but of course, I mean, you saying that, I find that condescending, but there is no condescending intention. And that just takes me to the language and intention. I think as Mohammed was saying, language configures how we think a lot. And big part of thinking is intention, right? Like I I guess in the fields that we all are, which is very close to the law and the legal aspects, how much more important the intention is than the action. And if the language is so attached to intention, then, well, there you go. The aspect of the legal implication of language when you are dealing with people maybe who are not native or who are using a third language to communicate with each other, well, it's so key. And yes, this maybe brings to another situation which happens, in my view, all the time in mediations with more than one language involved, is the etiquette of speaking in another language. So I mentioned this example of how let's say the multilingual person will get quite offended because of something that's meant as politeness. The reverse situation that I found almost in every single situation is when let's say you go to negotiate, or there is two parties, and one party is, let's say, from America, and the other party would be from Korea, or from Korea, and they're speaking, and they at some points they make small breaks, and they'll talk to each other in their own language, and then they'll go back to the other party and talk, or to the mediator, who might not be conversant in their language, and intercede. That's often taken also as quite, at least in my experience from what I have seen, is taken quite negatively by the people who don't understand that language. In my experience, this happens much more so when the other party is monolingual. And again, because it's lingua franca, we really just mean, I haven't had an experience where they say the parties were speaking in French, and there was one party that was French speaking only, and the other party was French and Spanish. Maybe that happens as well. But certainly, if one party is Spanish and English speaker, and the other party is English speaker, and the Spanish group will take a little break, clarify some things, and go back to speaking to the other party, that will very often be taken in very bad light and create a very bad mood. Obviously, because intentionality is attributed to that group. And the way I have had it explained, or the way I have interpreted this, because the intentionality that is attributed is that they are doing this maybe to hide something, or to put a wall, or to create some distance, or to just to say, well, this is us, this is you. We might be here mediation, we might be having something that we want to reach together, but there is something that I have that you cannot access. That could be the case, and there is nuance. Again, in my experience, I believe it often happens when one part of a group is not so conversant and could feel more comfortable in that language, so things would be explained better. But there could be abuse of it, and where to find that nuance is the role of the mediator. So I think it's very important for a mediator to at least have a cultural understanding of this, to be able to calibrate if it's not conversant with all the language at place. But taking to the topic that Vikram, you have brought up in other instances, which is neutrality. This ability of or this knowledge of the cultures or the language can also harm, because, as we always say, we can use the skill, but not necessarily our knowledge. So you might have a skill to mediate between people, but you might have knowledge that you shouldn't be using. In this case, maybe you have knowledge of all these three languages, and one of the parties is going to feel you're closer to the others because you can speak the languages, but we can't, and that's going to create a perception of partiality. So another very, very tricky aspect to look at when selecting a mediator. Otherwise, as we all know, the results of the mediation could be contested, could be questioned, and a lot of time wasted and effort. I don't know. I just have here a funny anecdote that my good friends, my good British friends and hosts, will maybe aware or unaware of. And is my dad used to go to a lot of conferences when I was young, and he will come and tell me, I was in this conference in Brazil, and it was wonderful. Everybody was great. I understood everyone, but I just didn't understand anything of what the English guys said. They speak very poorly. I said to him, maybe it's because it's too fluent. So it's something that I'm sure that all of us here, we have been conversant with. And it's just an anecdote, but it's again a detriment. I mean, what we're trying to reach here is not bashing of because I'm trying to have the motif of this conversation about the lingua franca, but it's not obviously about bashing this, but about being aware that when you walk into a situation that there's a conflict and we're trying to reach somewhere in between resolution, if we don't put ourselves in some of the shoes of the other party, at least at the very start, and it's easy to say, but that's the role of the mediator. If it's got to that, probably you're not doing it intentionally or not, then it's going to difficulty. At the same time, if the other party starts thinking, well, I can't understand them because they are too fluent, or I'm just not used to, let's say, native speaking, that's also going to put in a bad situation. And what I'm trying to say is that what I have perceived is that when the one party doesn't understand the other because the other is not fluent, that has a lower level of negativity than when the understanding comes because the other is too fluent. And just aspects to take into account that certainly a mediator should pay attention to. And I don't know. I mean, another one that is a little bit related here is name pronunciation. I give this example. My name, for example, it's easy to say your own name, but it's often mispronounced because it's Mikel, but often people call me Mikel. I'm quite used to, and you know, the different. I can already foresee which person speaking which language is going to call me what. But I've been in a situation where I was quite two parties. Was quite admiring one of the parties because he, in a very assertive way, in a very calm, and in my view, as the let's say more neutral person in the situation, was trying to correct the other party. Say, look, I've heard you said my name 2 or 3 times wrong. I understand people from your part of the world tend to say it like this, but my name is said like this. Okay, move on. Finish the session. Well, the only thing that the other party had picked up from that exchange was, look at this arrogant person. We're trying to solve a problem, and all he can think of is his name being pronounced correctly. And I was very surprised. And I joked with him, well, look, my name is also like this. You can pronounce it like that. And I thought, oh, thank you. Thank you for making it lighthearted. But that was not the intention. I thought, look at this. This is very interesting because they really wanted to have someone to make lightheart out of this, pronounce my name correctly, because they saw themselves as already saying a name that was difficult to pronounce, and they were seen as being put on obstacles and not being appreciated for the efforts they were making. Whereas the other party was frustrated and just went out of the way, be assertive and make that statement. So little tiny details, but took the entire energy of the conversation. And as we all know, once that energy appears or disappears, then it can affect all of it. I'm moving to one thing that we put in the book that Vikram and many other people contributed to, that the crocodile tears. So with all of these aspects, we're maybe talking a little bit about being not misunderstood, or being victimized, but there can also be an element of manipulation. So I cannot forget that when the two parties are mediating or go to mediation, and sometimes the stakes are very high commercially, there is an element of manipulation that can take place. And one example that I've seen is one party accusing the other, quite viciously in some aspects, about not understanding. And the other party, very, very intelligently, what they did is took this in, and instead of fighting it back and taking it as an insult, they used it to look more naive, more gullible, until later on we found out that there was no such there was not such innocence, and they were understanding everything that was being said, and they were using that to redraft certain elements of contract in their advantage. Just no judgment about whether one was correct or the other, because that's not what we mediators are here to do. But interesting to see how, what I was saying before about all these negative perceptions can actually also be turned against, let's say, the initial party, and something to be aware of, because at the end we're not trying to make a judgment. We're trying to let the parties walking together and have a deeper understanding of each other. And I don't have a lot of time left, but I just wanted to give a lot of these parts about the language has been more about interpretation, attribution of intention, etc. But there is an element that I will give for a big topic, which is simply how the languages are constructed. And this is some aspect that we also come across very often, more kind of in a familiar way, in an informal way, rather than when you're sitting into a mediation. But it does have a weight, because over and over it's demonstrated how it doesn't travel. And I have a few examples here. For example, in Spanish people tend, in my experience, tend to think that English can be a little bit materialistic, because most objects or most things that you talk about have a possessive adjective, whereas in Spanish we have a neutral one, and that tends to attribute some element of materialism, whereas I would argue it's not there. It's simply a different vehicle to convey a message. And then one thing that is very important for the legal world, for the contractual world, which is accuracy of language. We always seek accuracy of language to try to avoid conflict. That's one of the mantras of contract drafting and contract negotiation. But one thing that we have started questioning is, where do you place the accuracy of language? And are you aware that different languages place the accuracy in different places? And the example that we see is Chinese versus Spanish. Spanish, one would argue, has a very high degree of grammar accuracy, because we can conjugate verbs in multiple tens of ways, with tenses, inflections, and objects and subjects. But we don't have such a large vocabulary, so we'll end up using the same word to describe 10 different things. All the language will have more words, whereas Chinese is arguably relatively simple grammatically in comparison. Speaking relatively, of course, there's a very developed grammar, but it has one of the largest vocabularies in the world, and it has a word. There is always a word that you didn't, in my view, a word to define something that you had never heard of, or to open within that definition of another, I don't know, a spectrum of 20 nuances within that one. So that's just an example to say that, yes, accuracy of language is great, but let's be aware that maybe we have one language. Sometimes contracts are multilinguistical, but just going back to how are people going to be thinking if the accuracy of the language that they are being brought up with comes from a different place? Probably they'll put their stress is going to be in a different place. And just if I finish with a maybe funny anecdote, but this is all about words, thinking, but not just words, also what's around, and not just what's said, but what's not said. And I put here the examples of 3 very different countries: Texas, Norway, and Japan, where I in a past life was negotiating contracts in the oil and gas. I was having quite a close contact with these 3 countries, and I realized that the silences were very important. And as a Spanish, very talkative person, this was a big shock. So I learned to start making silences. One thing, this is long time before Teams, but I will mute my phone, or I will just try to stay quiet against my impulses, so that I would respect the other person. And at one point, someone, I think it was in Japan, but it could have been Texas or Norway, they told me, "But Mikel, are you there?" I say, "Yes, of course. I'm just keeping quiet because you're talking." And they said, but you have to say something. "Yeah, but you are talking now." I say, "Yeah, but say something, And then I learned that the Japanese do the Norwegians do and the Texas maybe they say or something like this, but that kind of little particles that were woven into the language, and maybe it's a broad generalization, but important to understand not just the words but the silences.
But you can't end so soon. There's a question for you, which is very interesting thing to notice the negative and abusing power of language. Is it better for the mediator to work personally with each parties in these cases, you think?
If it's important, the question is if it's important to work with these parties.
Is it better? Is it better?
Is it better to?
Yeah, very interesting to notice the negative and abusing power of languages. You made some reference there.
Yeah, I guess it's better to work with the parties, but the most convenient is to try to stay impartial and neutral, because once you start, I mean, maybe it's a good exercise to do in like now as a reflective way, but when you're in the heat of the moment, it's probably more effective to try to not go too deep, because you might end up looking as favoring one side.
So that is a wrap up, because we are short, we are on time right now. So if you want to, is there any wrap up kind of thing you want to do, please?
No, thank you so much for the opportunity and for listening.
Oh, it was a pleasure listening to you, and I feel that we could have gone on longer, but the only thing is that I actually want to shorten these sessions, because finally people end up watching them or not. So thank you very much, Mikel, not Mikel. Okay, I'm sorry. And you never corrected me earlier. I've spoken to you, didn't correct me. I kept saying this.
I'm sure I'm not pronouncing Vikram as accurately as should be.
I'm happy. You just pronouncing my name. You calling me. I'm okay. I'm happy.
Thank you so much.
So,